Do any of you worry? What is it you worry about? Our text today clearly tells us not to worry, and it does so in a few nicer words than what Bob Newhart did, don't you think? Jesus says, don't worry. But Jesus was obviously talking to people right then and there and not to us, right? It must have been a simpler time to live. Don't worry. Look around us in the world. The news and our everyday observations are full of reasons to worry. Jesus couldn't have been talking about our political system with the demonstrations and dramatic changes in leadership styles. Jesus wasn't living in a time when the world seemed to be on fire. He wasn't living in a time when people were flooded out of their homes or when refugees were fleeing their homes in the face of barbaric oppression. Jesus wasn't living in a time of deep division and rampant hate where ethnic cemeteries and houses of worship were being vandalized, burned, and bombed. He couldn't possibly have that message for us, could he? I don't know how Jesus could be telling the people not to worry. He himself would soon be facing death and all sorts of unpleasant challenges, and he says not to worry? What's he talking about? Most of us have a decision to make when it comes to mealtime. It isn't, are we going to eat? It's, what are we going to eat? In the morning when I get ready, I stare at my closet to try to figure out what I'm going to wear today. Am I feeling like dressing up a little bit? Or will I go for comfort? What's the weather today? Do I need the warmth of a sweater, or would a short sleeve shirt work? I don't worry about not having clothes. Jesus is telling people not to worry about what you will eat and what you will wear. Jesus says God had provided all these necessities before in Israel's history, so why wouldn't he not provide them again? It's a matter of trust. So why is it that we spend so much time and energy on worrying, or is it just me? Don't worry about anything? I just can't seem to do that. It's not easy as just saying, stop it. I just can't stop worrying and shift to being happy, can I? Great. Now I'm worrying about worrying too much. What am I going to do? Stop it. Obviously, worry isn't a new phenomenon. It's been around since the beginning of human history. But what is worry anyway? What is it that seems to occupy so much of my time? To me, there are two categories of worry. One is worrying about things over which you have no control. Now, here's what made my mother the queen of worry. She seemed to worry and fret over all sorts of things. When I was in the Air Force, I was stationed in the Philippines for over 4 years at the time when Ferdinand Marcos was nearing the end of his reign, and the end of his reign was coming to a pretty violent end. When the opposition leader, Benigno Aquino Jr., was assassinated on the tarmac in Manila airport, there was a return to the rioting and bloodshed that hit the newspapers back home, and my mother was certain that I was in imminent danger. My assurances to the contrary didn't ease her worry. There was a bombing on one of the remote islands far, far away from where I was, but the dateline read Manila, and she knew that I lived close to Manila. So she wore out her worry beads, even though she had no control over what danger I faced. The very fact that I was a pilot filled her with fear every time there was a plane crash, especially when I was flying in Southeast Asia shortly after the war in Vietnam ended, but the fighting raged on in Cambodia. Mom would see the accounts on TV of planes being shot at and knew that I was in mortal danger, but there wasn't anything she could do to change that. There were plenty of problems in life to deal with, and they seemed to consume us if we let them. Our health, the things that we own, the fear of accidents, aging, criticism from others. I could go on, and I know each of you could bring a lot of things to add to this list. The thing about worry is that it's useless. When we worry about what might happen, as my mother worried about what might happen to me when I was flying into dangerous places, we tend to go directly to the worst case scenario. She was certain that I would be shot down or that I would die in a fiery crash. But think about the things you may have worried about in the past. Did they turn out as terribly as you might have imagined? Probably not. Worry can change nothing except our health and well-being. In our text today, we hear Jesus saying, "Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life?" In fact, worrying actually subtracts from your span of life. Doctors report that nearly half of adults suffer from ill effects to their health because of worry and stress, and say that 75% of visits to primary care physicians are stress-related. So we worry about the changes in our health, and we begin an ever-tightening spiral that can lead to heart disease, cancer, lung ailments, and suicide. Someone once said that ulcers aren't caused by what you eat, but by what is eating you. Jesus warns about the futility of worry and invites us to trust in God. But does that mean that we should just follow the popular song of a few years ago? Okay, that's supposed to start automatically. Nope. Oh, well, the song was, "Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, be happy." Be honest. Were you worried that I'd get through an entire sermon without a song reference? Don't worry, be happy. There it was. No, I don't mean to imply that there aren't things that should not concern you. And that's the difference. The transformation from worry to concern. Some might think that the two are interchangeable, worry and concern, but there's a difference. Worry is condition-oriented and concern is action-oriented. Worry is either living in the past, stressing over things you have done or have not done, or possibly looking into the future at what is possibly the worst thing that can happen. Worry takes you out of the present, and the only time you have to take action is the present. In Philippians 4:6, Paul writes, "Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known to God." Paul is saying, don't worry about this. Instead, pray about this. But even prayer leaves a place for action. Pope Francis puts it this way: you pray for the hungry, and then you feed the hungry. That's how prayer works. I might pray for someone to come and fix a problem, and God answers, "Aren't you someone?" Today, many of us took action to help alleviate the hunger that we know plagues our city by participating in the food drive. And later in the day, I hope many of you will take the flyer and the bulletin to California Pizza Kitchen to help give the children in our preschool a needed upgrade to their computer lab. And at the same time, take care of your hunger. It's a shameless plug, isn't it? I'm not worried about it, however. I ran across an interesting comparison between worry and concern. Worry distracts us. Concern focuses us. Worry disables planning. Concern helps us plan. Worry blurs our vision. Concern clarifies our purpose. Worry tends to give up. Concern perseveres. Worry exaggerates. Concern pinpoints the problems. Worry focuses on self. Concern on others. Just this week, I had a moment of worry. I was to lead the chapel for preschool on Wednesday, and I woke up in the middle of the night, Monday night, worrying about what I would do or say. Now, I could have just continued to lie there, worrying about what I was going to do or say, and not being able to sleep, which would probably make me cranky all day. But I chose to turn the worry into concern, so I got up and began to lay out a simple plan of action. Then I could go back to sleep and not be the Grinch to everyone I met the next day. But how do we distinguish concern from worry? One way is to be present to God. I mentioned that worry is either living in the past or in the future. God is calling us to live in the present, where things can get done. Sometimes it may be difficult to see that God is present in any situation. Sure, God is everywhere, but sometimes I'm just not tuned into the right frequency to recognize God's presence. God is there, but I'm not. I got to thinking about how I could begin to find God's presence when I was having a difficulty with something. I began to wonder if I was looking at things the way God would look at them. Maybe I could try to look at things from a different perspective. I'm often obsessed with details, looking for patterns and designs in strange places. It's one of my endearing quirks. I love looking at the clouds and finding shapes that look like a duck or a dinosaur, and then watching the duck morph into a unicorn and the dinosaur into a bunny. I think that many people do that sort of thing if they slow down enough to actually look up. But where my weirdness takes an extra step is in our bathroom. Our painted walls are textured, and I'm especially watchful of the wall over my toilet. Now, don't go too far with that. Anyway, as I gaze at the wall, I look for textures that remind me of something familiar. Since I live in the desert, that might take the place of looking at the clouds, but I digress. Early on, I discovered a wonderful little angel. I don't know if you can see it in there. Wonderful little angel just above my normal visual sight line. I made out wings and even a halo that circled his head. Or maybe her head. I don't know if angels have gender. Discovering my little angel brought a smile to my face, and now every time I face that wall, I look up for my little angel. And every time I see him, I smile, and I feel my spirits rise. But textures are made up of high places and recessed places. For a long time, I only focused on the high places, the things that stood out. But recently, as I stared at another wall, I told you I was a little quirky sometimes, I saw something else. I saw what I thought was a boy running, and I wondered, is he running away from something or towards something? And I wondered, am I running away from something or towards something? Should I be worried about that? Sometimes we just need a different perspective to turn our worry into action. I think Jesus even saw that need. When I took a different perspective on one of his teachings, new learnings emerged for me. In Matthew 5:38-42, we hear him talking about turning the other cheek, going the extra mile, and giving your cloak as well as your coat. I began to wonder if there was another teaching underneath what we normally see there. What if turning the other cheek could also mean looking at things from another perspective? What if walking the extra mile gave us the opportunity to discover more information about a problem? What if in giving your cloak as well as your coat meant that in this sharing we might find God? I believe that much of our problem with worry comes from missing where God is present and inviting us in. The images found on my walls urge me to look at things from a different perspective. When we limit our image of God to what we learned as a child, or even last week, we may miss the opportunity to see where God is leading us and notice the blessings that God is pouring out on us. When we take the time to begin to look at life from a different perspective, I believe we can find new ways to replace worry with thankfulness. We can begin to find more of where God is in our lives. Worry about not having enough can begin to transform into a realization of how much we do have, how rich our lives really are. Okay, another song reference from long ago. Remember Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi? The refrain with, "Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone. They paved paradise to put up a parking lot." I only changed keys about 4 or 5 times there. In his book, Naked Spirituality, Brian McLaren tells a story about an experience when a friend asked him, "How much money would you give to keep your eyesight if you knew you were going blind?" And he answered, "A lot, everything." "What if it was your ability to walk? If you had a disease that would leave you wheelchair-bound unless you could pay for a cure, how much would you spend?" He said, "Everything. I would liquidate everything I own and go as far into debt as I could to save my mobility." "How about your hearing?" "The same." "How about your sanity, your mental health, your intelligence?" And he finally asked, "What's your point?" And his friend said, "I'm just trying to save you from the big yellow taxi syndrome. If you were to lose any one of these abilities, you would pay millions of dollars to recover it. So each one is worth millions to you. You would rather have the ability to see or hear or move or think than tens of millions of dollars in the bank. Well, you have them, which means you're better off than a multimillionaire. You have to know what you've got before it's gone." So if we begin our days focused on gratitude for what we do have, many of the worries that consume our life and our health begin to fade away, and we begin to focus on transforming those worries that we can do something about into concerns and begin to move into the action mode. I'm reminded of the 23rd Psalm, which tells of a cup overflowing with goodness and mercy. Unlike my usual knee-jerk response to a spill, which is to be worrying about staining the carpet or ruining the table, I hear, "Stop it. Be thankful for the spill. My blessings are more than you can imagine, and the overflowing is for you to share." So will you worry about the spill, or will you just be thankful? Amen.